Hi guys, welcome to the Challenge Podcast, the show dedicated to transforming your life. I'm Coach Steve.
And I'm Coach Helen, and we're excited to bring you the best information on exercise, nutrition, mindset and health. Let's get on with the show.
What's up guys, Coach Steve here and welcome back to another episode of the Challenge Podcast. In today's episode, I'm joined with Magdelena Mills, or Lena, and Lena is a psychologist from Curious Mind Psychology. And in this episode, we talk a lot about behavior change and the psychological effects and the importance of our psychology when we're trying to transform our body. And in this episode, Magdalena goes into lots of in-depth analysis on why we do certain behaviors and gives you some strategies on how you can identify and then overcome some of the behaviors that lead you to be in a poor condition or being overweight or out of shape or not happy with your body. So if you find that you are feeling really stressed or have lots of anxiety around transforming your body, this is the episode you want to listen to. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the podcast. What's up guys, Coach Steve here and welcome back to another episode of the Challenge Podcast. Today I'm joined by a very special guest. I've got psychologist Magdelena Mills, or Lena. Lena, welcome to the Challenge Podcast.
Hi, Steve. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm so excited to be able to chat to you about what you do as a psychologist and everything around health psychology. Now, Lena, would you like to start by giving us a little bit of an introduction about yourself? Maybe, where you're from and, what you do in your practice.
Sure thing. Well, I'm a registered psychologist and the founder of Curious Mind Psychology. What I do as a psychologist, so my specialization is in counseling psychology, which basically means I've got a particular expertise in counseling and psychotherapy for general psychological issues like emotion regulation, stress, self-esteem, family and relationship stuff, health management. And I also work with mental health issues and mental disorders like anxiety, mood disorders, depression, trauma, and disordered eating.
Wow, so it seems like you help a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds and different areas within psychology. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. I mostly work with individuals, but I've got a special interest in things like anxiety, attachment, stress, trauma, and health psychology. And I suppose in private practice, we get all kinds of folks walking through our doors, either because they feel like they want to present for therapy or the doctors have sent them our way. And so we have to work in a really integrated and holistic way. So meaning we've got to help you understand how your unique beliefs, environment, history, your physical health, emotional and relationship health links to influence your mental health. So yeah, having a really well-grounded and holistic approach, I think, is best.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, Lena, I'm going to ask you lots of naive questions. And the first one I'm going to ask is, when people present to you, do they normally present and say, hi, Magdalena, I have anxiety? Or do they come and present to you and say, hi, Magdalena, I'm just feeling a little bit stressed or overwhelmed? Like, how do people present to you?
Some people, I think, have a really clear idea of what the problem is. They might have even had a little bit of therapy before, and that's all right. We can just proceed with what they want to focus on. But otherwise, we can just sit down together. You might have an unclear sense that something's just not going the way that you kind of want it to in your life, or an unclear sense that you're distressed and you're not coping as well as you think you should be. And in that instance, we can just make a safe space for you to explore what some of the issues might be together, and from there create the goals or focus down on what the problem actually could be.
Right. So my understanding is you help people to understand themselves and help to create goals on how to change themselves. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Depending on what my clients' needs are, we can work at a symptom level and do more goal-based stuff, strategies and skills training to deal with their issues, or go deeper and work on the underlying things that might be driving their struggles and their pain.
Wow. Now, I guess the main thing I wanted to take out of this podcast here is the relationship between our psychological well-being and our mental well-being and our nutritional choices and our physical choices around, our body image. And I guess I want to start by asking you, do you think that there is a relationship between someone who may be overweight or has put on a lot of weight over, a certain amount of years and their emotional well-being? Do you think there's a connection between the two?
I think that There definitely could be, not always in all cases. There might be just a purely medical condition for someone's weight or how they appear or what's going on with their body. But, in the case of their psychology or their feelings, weight can definitely be a symptom that something's not right. And that could be a sign of an emotional problem.
Okay. I've worked with a few clients in the past where they tend to find food as comfort, and they find certain maybe high calorically dense foods or really sweet foods as a comfort thing. Is there a reason why humans turn to food as like a comfort thing?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really common for all of us to use food as a means to reward ourselves or to comfort ourselves. I mean, turning to food as a reward could be something as simple as a behavior or a ritual, something that comes from our heritage or our culture. We often see food as a symbol of like celebration, birthdays, holidays, more recently Christmas, and we do anticipate accompanying ourselves and overeating at these times. That's something that's pretty commonly sanctioned, seen as normal. It could be something in terms of comforting that we've picked up from our family who use food and treats as a really convenient and accessible means to kind of, reward us for something or to make us feel good. Using food as a comfort can also be a form of self-soothing, that helps us to regulate painful feelings. And comfort food is often really cheap, accessible, something that we can easily eat in the privacy of our own homes. Or something that we might substitute in favor of other harmful and addictive self-soothing behaviors like drugs, sex, alcohol, exercise even. But, more commonly, it could just simply be that people don't have any other knowledge of how to regulate their feelings otherwise.
Okay. So if I've identified that I seek comfort foods, let's say every night I want to have a big bowl of ice cream in the evening, what steps, and I've identified that I'm doing it for comfort reasons, what steps can I take to try to change my behavior or introduce other soothing techniques?
Mm-hmm. Well, let's see. I think the first step would be asking yourself, what's directing my eating or my impulse in this moment? Am I hungry? What am I feeling? If I'm not hungry, what emotion might that be? Is there a need that's connected to that? What can I do to support myself? For example, am I sad? Am I bored? Am I lonely? Do I need a hug? Do I need to feel connected to someone? Do I need to feel like I'm doing something more exciting with my evening? And from there, just taking a step to either do it. But even if you can't or don't feel ready to take a step towards changing the behavior, I think making an effort to increase your awareness of what's driving the behavior is still better than nothing.
Right. So it's trying to take steps to understand yourself, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I think we can often engage in these kinds of behaviors really mindlessly. Like we just go on autopilot. We don't think about it. We will just do it. We'll walk to the fridge or the freezer, we'll open it and we'll stand at the bench, eating ice cream. And we won't necessarily be thinking about anything or even tasting what we're eating. And it's over and done with quickly. And it might not have been that satisfying. So just bringing a mindful awareness to what's going on emotionally within yourself or even within your body, tuning into those signals of hunger or understanding when you're satisfied and full. And, it seems pretty simple and intuitive, but oftentimes it's really, really not. So adopting what I call like a beginner's mind, tuning into yourself and to an activity as though you were doing it for the very first time. Because when we do something for the first time as a novice, then we're fully engaged, with all of our senses. We don't have any judgments or expectations about it. We're just observing and learning what's going on step by step and moment by moment.
Yeah, I love that idea of a beginner's mind. And I feel like many of us, as we transition through adulthood, don't really get a chance to be a beginner again. And I personally took a little bit of a journey over the past couple of months, and I bought a piano, a keyboard, and I've been trying to teach myself how to play the keyboard because I haven't had the chance to be a beginner at something in quite a long time. And it's interesting because it translates a lot over to other aspects of my life. So when I go back to weightlifting in the gym, I adopt that mindset of being a beginner playing piano to being a beginner at a deadlift again and really trying to feel that. And I think that's a really unique strategy that people can take, is to try to be a beginner at life and really connecting to those steps. And Magdalena, you kind of touched on it about being mindful. And I guess mindfulness gets thrown around a lot, especially with meditation and such. You know, if someone is trying to be more mindful in their day-to-day life, what steps could people take other than, closing their eyes and trying to meditate? Would you recommend someone to do something like journaling or speak to people about their thoughts and feelings and their day-to-day activities?
Yeah, I think you don't have to just do a meditation to be mindful. And it could be a mindfulness of your body. It could be a mindfulness of your thoughts. It could be a mindfulness of your emotions. But mindfulness is not like a goal. So I would even just take a moment to be wary about setting certain targets to be mindful, because it's more of a value or an attitude. And so to make it easier, you might designate certain times in a day to try and make the space for you to tune into yourself and be mindful of the experience. And some people might do that with a everyday ordinary activity like drinking a glass of water or having their morning tea break or spending time with your partner, for example. But you could also set the time just as easily to sit down and journal and really connect and reflect what's gone on through your day. But also, I think the reflective process is more of an analyzing activity than it is about an awareness of the moment activity.
So the reflective process is more about understanding yourself than understanding the exact moment. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so the attitude of mindfulness is something that is free of judgment, free of an analysis. We're not reacting or responding to the things that are occurring. We are simply observing and experiencing them, if that makes sense.
Right. The way I'm taking it now is, we like to run our lives on habits and certain routine behaviors, kind of like what you said before about being on autopilot. And when we want to take steps to change that, we need to start being more aware of what we're doing in our day-to-day life and our activities. Is that kind of correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
So when people embark on the health journeys and let's say, I want to lose weight, or I want to get stronger, or I want to improve my fitness levels, or I just want to be able to, bend down and pick up my kids or something. Most of the time that involves changing our behaviors and our routines. And my question to you is, what do you think is the biggest reason why we can't change or we can't introduce a new behavior to our lifestyle?
I'd probably say there are a couple of reasons. The first is that we don't have a clear sense of why we're doing it, like a real connection to the purpose for us. And the other is that we struggle to regulate the behaviors that might derail us as we're trying to achieve those goals or engage in those behavior changes.
So we can't regulate our behavior. So is that kind of like self-control? Is that what you mean by that?
More regulating the emotions that derail our behaviors or drive us to engage in typically unhealthy, or I might just say here, unhelpful behaviors for us. And I think control can be a bit of a double-edged sword, because if we're seeking to control something, inevitably we're all human and we're going to fail. Something is going to happen. We're going to derail ourselves. We'll make a mistake. We'll be tempted. And then that loss of control is perceived as a failure. And then we can have all kinds of really harsh reactions and negative feelings in response to that perceived failure. So, rather than control, I think perhaps erring towards like the awareness and the acceptance that inevitably we're going to make a mistake, but we're pursuing something that's really valuable and meaningful to us, hence that purpose, and getting back in line with moving towards that, even if sometimes the curve towards or the line towards moving towards that involves going backwards sometimes.
Wow. Now, you kind of mentioned failure, and I think we all fail. We're humans. And I think that it really comes down to that response. We can use failure as a real negative thing. We can use failure as a really positive thing and as a learning experience. And I think some people tend to look at failure as that negative thing, and we sometimes punish ourselves for that. And I've worked with people in the past who use exercise as punishment, and they'll go to the gym 7, 8, 9, 10 times a week, and they'll just keep running and doing exercise as like a punishment because they're out of shape, overweight, or they're just not happy with their body image. My question to you is, why do we sometimes use physical things such as exercise as a punishment for ourselves?
Well, at a surface level, I think it stems from this societal idea that we've been conditioned to believe, punishing yourself to the point of pain is the most effective way to discipline and motivate yourself, or to atone for consuming a bad food, or for being lazy, or whatever the undesirable behavior was. It's really harmful because it's rooted in emotions of shame and fear, and it implies that negative reinforcement will encourage you to avoid engaging in that bad behavior in future. I think it's also connected to a fantasy that treating yourself this way by punishing yourself through exercise reflects a character that is strong, disciplined, and effective. And that's a myth. And I think the media perpetuates these ideas by idealizing harsh, shaming, critical trainers and coaches. We only have to look to several big ticket weight loss shows to see examples of that.
Yeah, or even just any sort of movie or TV show where you see the coach standing in the corner, their arms crossed, frown face, and, work harder, train harder, or any sort of military, movie, and that's what you see. And sometimes we think that's what we need to do. Is that what you're trying to say, Magdalena?
Yeah. I think that our culture and the media can encourage those ideas. And on a more deeper level, we might endorse these ideas because they can reflect our own experiences within our families and our relationships. Our families might have used punishment, fear, disgust, pain, guilt, shame to discourage us from behaving in certain ways. And it's really saddening. I hear clients talk about this all the time because it sets us up to believe that punishment and negative emotions are more powerful motivators than positive ones. And that's the start of a really damaging relationship with our feelings and with ourselves, how we treat ourselves. We can internalize these negative experiences and these critical judgments from other people and begin to even associate them with, the thought that if people are treating us that way, then it means that they care about us, or that's what it takes to really look after myself, or to make sure that I'm staying on track. And then we can even harshly criticize ourselves and seek out others who treat us like this. And so we might even then start to select people or trainers or coaches who embody these values and ideas because it's just what's familiar.
Yeah. Wow. Powerful. I want to talk about the challenge that we run. It's a 12-week body transformation challenge. And people who do the challenge have a training plan and a nutrition plan. And we would admit that sometimes a 12-week intense training program or intense nutrition plan can create some poor health behaviors, such as, eating disorders or overtraining and, physical ailments come with that, or just stress and anxiety from deadlines and trying to transform our body. I guess my question to you is, what are some of the risks of completing a really short-term, 12-week nutrition or training plan that's really intense or focused? Is there any risks involved with something like that?
I'd say that there are always risks associated with dieting and exercise plans in general, and these risks are amplified if the plan is unsupported. Like if there isn't a professional or a community offering guidance, advice, support, and more importantly, the opportunity to tailor the program to be more suitable to your specific needs. Like what you've said, things like disordered eating, stress, and anxiety can arise from these plans. And that's why it's really, really important to be guided and supported by others so that you've got your blind spots covered for the duration of the plan. And if any changes need to be made in real time, that they can be. We're not perfect. We can't always recognize when we're going into dangerous waters. And so to have a support community around us that can also be our second set of eyes is really important.
I wanted to talk a little bit about body image. And I think, the world we live in right now with so much social media, with, airbrush photos and this concern, well, my concern with girls having to look a certain way or guys having to look a certain way. And sometimes there's some warning signs where we become a little bit over obsessed with the way that we look, which leads to certain behaviors such as bulimia, or for guys, like certain eating patterns. Within your profession, do you see any warning signs for people who may be showing some early warning signs for some unhealthy behaviors around body image or training and nutrition?
Yeah, there are a few general ones, and I will just say as a disclaimer that the information we're exploring together today is more general and informative and is not a substitute for one-on-one therapy where we can identify your individual risk factors and apply this knowledge to your specific circumstances. In general, I think you're heading into risky territory if your training and nutrition behaviors are isolating you, if these behaviors are affecting your ability to function at work, in your relationships, and your general activities, like your sleeping, if that starts to get affected, is a really big one. If you're preoccupied with your training and your nutrition, and this preoccupation is causing you distress and pain, or even if someone that you care about has expressed their concern for you, that's a really big one too.
Okay. So first of all, thanks for pointing out that every person is going to be individual, and it's really hard to generalize any advice that is part of this podcast here. I think there's a fine line between someone expressing their concern in the terms of, hey, Stephen, you're going to the gym a lot more. Like, why don't you come and sit on the couch and watch a movie with me? Versus, oh, Stephen, you're training twice a day. Maybe you're training too much. If someone's listening to this and they might have someone close to them and they're saying those things to them, how can one distinguish between someone being maybe jealous of them going to the gym every day versus someone being concerned that they're overtraining?
I suppose you could just ask more questions. If you have that suspicion, then asking something open-ended like, thanks for sharing your concern with me. It's great to know that you care. I wonder, what are your worries, or what do you think prompted you to ask me that? So just clarifying.
I love that. Awesome. Now, Magdalena, I just wanted to ask you where someone can start to seek help. Is there any steps that someone can take, maybe certain tools that they could use or applications or behaviors that they can introduce to support a healthy relationship with training and nutrition from a psychological standpoint?
I think it's really important to recognize that, we were talking about the specific risks about doing a challenge, for example. And I think that, a high risk time is also following the period you've completed the challenge, because oftentimes it's possible to sustain these plans for the prescribed number of weeks, but following this, you might run into a bit more difficulty trying to sustain it or the changes that you've been able to achieve. Whether that's because your body can't sustain the program, or whether that's because your lifestyle and your environment can't sustain the program, it's really, really common for you to then regain a little bit of weight or all of the weight, or to just fall back into familiar patterns and then feel negatively about, going backwards somehow. And from there, getting preoccupied with it to the point where some unhealthy symptoms start to pop up is really, really common. So bearing these risks and these warning signs in mind, I think picking up some skills that will support a sustainable approach to nutrition and exercise is really valuable. And those skills might include what we talked a bit about before, mindfulness skills to enhance your connection to and your awareness of your body, your hunger and fullness signals, and your emotions. Also working on your ability to just recognize the opportunity to ask yourself the question, what is driving me to exercise? What is driving me to eat? And linking these feelings and impulses with what are the actual needs that my body and my feelings are telling me I have to engage in or want right now. Asking yourself as a general point of reflection, how am I talking to myself and treating myself? Am I being judgmental or demeaning or critical? Would I feel comfortable treating a child like this? And I think that's, a good rule of thumb. If you wouldn't treat a small, vulnerable person like that, why would you speak to yourself in that manner? And that, harks back to what we were talking about with shame and punishment as motivators. And, the research and clinical evidence shows us that no, they're not effective motivators in the long term. They might be in the short term, but in the long term, it'll just lead you into those cycles of going all or nothing. Because ultimately we burn ourselves out and the pain and the distress gets to the point where we revert back into the comfort eating cycles, for example.
So it sounds like we want to focus on the positive aspects, the small victories, more than the negative sides or the failures that we might face along our health journey. Is that correct?
I think noticing the positive and using that to balance, the other side is important, but having self-compassion and treating yourself respectfully and kindly does not mean that you're not holding yourself accountable for your failures. Being able to be compassionate and say, what was it that drove me to drink that whole bottle of Chardonnay in the fridge? What was it that drove me to have 3 serves of ice cream or whatever else, or not exercise for the whole month? Doesn't mean you're letting yourself off the hook. It means that you can, with respect and kindness, just really honestly answer yourself and try to find what the answer might be. But shaming yourself and criticizing yourself means you're likely to avoid engaging in those thoughts and those self-reflective activities and instead just kind of beat yourself into doing something to compensate for it rather than understand why it happened. Does that make sense?
Yeah, wow, that's really powerful stuff. Magdalena, we've covered a lot of topics today, and I think we've just scraped the surface, and I've asked lots of very naive questions. If someone has more questions for you, how could they get in contact with you?
Well, you're welcome to shoot me an email. You can find me online at www.curiousmindpsychology.com, on Facebook as Curious Mind Psychology, or you can just send me a text or give me a ring at the practice on 0432 177 672.
And I'll put all those in the show notes. Now, Magdalena, if someone wanted to book in a time with you, where is Curious Mind Psychology?
So we're based in Footscray, which is 3 stops out of the CBD of Melbourne. It's right near the station. Otherwise, if you're not in the state or you can't get to the practice easily, I offer online sessions using a secure encrypted platform. So that's not like Skype, where people might easily be able to listen in. It complies with all the latest confidentiality laws. So just give me a ring or send me an email and we can find out what might work best for you and talk about availability.
Beautiful. And I think I want to stress the point here that it's okay to seek help. And I've worked with quite a few clients in the past where, I give them the best nutrition plan that I think is suitable for them and the best training plan that I think is suitable for them. But once they seeked help from a clinical psychologist to overcome certain emotional barriers, that's when we started to notice change in their body. So if you've been training for a long period of time and you're not seeing the changes in your body and you find that you're constantly drinking the whole bottle of Chardonnay and having 3 servings of ice cream and you don't know how it happens, it just happens, I would highly suggest that you seek help either from Magdelena online or your nearest clinical psychologist. Magdalena, I want to thank you so much for donating some of your time to be part of the Challenge podcast. And I know that a lot of people will find this podcast very helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure. I hope it's helpful.
Thanks for listening, guys. If you like the show, share it with a friend or leave us a review on iTunes to help us spread the good word.
See you next time.